What's up, everybody? Welcome to Soul Focus TV. I'm Coach Tom, and this is Nutrition Corner. Today, we are going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite things, protein. All right, so if you've ever sat down with me before, you know that I'm a big proponent of most people do not get enough protein in their diet, and it's got nothing to do with building muscle. It's got everything to do with maintaining muscle. All right, so let's start off at the beginning here. So aside from water, in non-fatty tissue, it is the single most abundant molecule in general, proteins in general, because every protein is different. There's many, many proteins. And they're responsible for virtually everything that your body does. Like water is the medium through which all processes occur. Protein is the thing that occurs. It's either the byproduct of or the catalyst for. All the processes and the things that happen in your body can't happen without proteins. So you'll hear me say proteins. I'm not just referring to the macronutrient in concept. I'm talking about all types of proteins and the amino acids that build them. So proteins in general, they control pretty much everything. They keep your body in an alkaline acid-base kind of balance. Energy production, different periods of energy production, ATP cycles and Krebs cycle, things like that, which we touched on last week in metabolism. Cell signaling, so like biochemical processes, like anything where there's transporter proteins for nutrients and hormones for signaling cells to turn on and off certain processes, things along those lines. And there are hundreds of amino acids out there. And amino acids are the fundamental building block for how we create proteins. Even though there are hundreds of them, they're all built the same way. They all follow the similar structure. So they'll have a central carbon atom. It's got a carboxyl group attached to one side. It's got a free hydrogen on one side, and it has an amino group, which is like the nitrogenous, sometimes sulfuric, but those three sides are all the same almost all the time. The one thing that makes all amino acids different, it's got a side group, or sometimes it's called like an R chain or an R group. And they can be very, very simple, like glycine only has a single hydrogen coming off of that central. That's the entire side group, is that one hydrogen, and that's what makes it that amino acid. Or it can be something very complex like tryptophan, which has, I believe, 4 and 12 additional carbons and hydrogens. Something along those lines. I can't remember off the top of my head. But of all those different types and those hundreds of different amino acids, they all build however many combinations. If you took probability or statistics, you could do the math for yourself. But the hundreds of amino acids create thousands of different proteins, even tens of thousands. Let me see. Of those hundreds, there's only really 20 that have been identified that human beings actually need in macronutrient numbers. So that's where we talk about the macronutrient protein, to try and get as many of those calories in so that we cover all the bases. And that's why we talk about different protein sources. Of those 20 that humans need, 9 of them are considered essential because human beings do not make them at all. So we have to get them from our diet. So we're going to run through that list real quick. I have my cheat sheet over here. We have phenylalanine, valine, threonine, tryptophan, isoleucine, methionine, histidine, leucine, and lysine. Like I said, humans don't make those at all, so we have to get those from our diet. And if we don't have those, then we have a deficiency. And deficiencies in proteins can cause death. There's certain biological functions that need to happen, physiological functions. If they don't happen, our body cannot survive. So we have to get those from our diet. There are 6 considered semi-essential, meaning that our body makes some of them, but not enough for quote-unquote optimal living. So those 6, we have cysteine, tyrosine, arginine, glutamine, glycine, and proline. And then there's also what's it called? I forget the other one. But then there's the 5 non-essentials, which our body can create out of other things. That's alanine, asparagine, aspartic acid, glutamic acid, and serine. All right. So all those amino acids, like I said, they're all built that same way. They all have the carboxyl group, the amino group. They have that free hydrogen on the edge, and then they have their side group that makes them different. All right. So the process of creating and breaking down these proteins into and from amino acids. So when we eat protein, we're eating the macronutrient of protein. It's got all these different amino acids in it. Our body can't do anything with that because it's too big. So part of the digestive process in our stomach is it's called hydrolysis, where our body uses water during digestion to break these proteins down. So it takes water, and if you remember from last week, hydrolysis, anything with the term lysis means we are breaking apart. And because it's hydro, we are using water to break apart protein. So what it does is it injects water into the protein molecule, and it breaks it apart because it completes the 2 different amino acids so that they can separate and be happy on their own. The opposite is true when your body needs to build those proteins back up for whatever it needs. So it will dehydrate it. So it's called dehydration synthesis. So it's creating the protein by dehydrating the amino acids. So it pulls the water molecules out, and then they fuse back together. That would be peptide bonds. So when your body does that process, it can use or not use those proteins however it needs to. We talked about last week the process of gluconeogenesis, where your body creates glucose out of something that is not a carb or fat. Right? There are 13 amino acids that your body can use in gluconeogenesis. So if your body doesn't need that protein, it can use those amino acids in gluconeogenesis to create its own glucose, so it can use it as fuel instead of for any other purpose for proteins. There are 2 dedicated amino acids that your body uses in a ketogenic cycle. So the byproduct of those would be ketones. That would be leucine and lysine. Then there are 5 that your body can use either way, depending on which part of the energy cycle that they enter the equation. So if your body doesn't need the extra glucose, it's going to kick it through the ketogenic cycle. And from there, your body's going to create ketones. So that could be a marker if there's something going wrong, or if you're on a ketogenic diet. So that's why during urine tests, they'll sample your urine for ketones. It's those 5, you got tyrosine, isoleucine, tryptophan, phenylalanine, and threonine. So like I said, those ones can go either way. You got the 2 dedicated for ketogenic is leucine and lysine, and then the other 13 are dedicated to only doing gluconeogenesis. So that's where your body can create the glucose. We talked about dehydration synthesis. We talked about hydrolysis. So the last little bit, just to kind of put it in perspective, so into kind of the muscle area of protein. When your body attaches all of these amino acids together using dehydration synthesis, it can be something very, very simple, where there's one protein in your muscles is actin. It's got about 400 amino acids all synthesized and peptide bonded together. It's 400 amino acids. So to kind of put things in context, that's considered a small protein in your muscle. Compared to something considered large in your muscle, you're taking about 30,000 amino acids, all peptide bonded together, and that's titin. So those are just 2 types of proteins that are in your muscles. So when people talk about, oh, protein is for building big muscles, yeah, sure, it can, and it does. But your body doesn't have a method of really storing protein. The closest kind of mechanism we have to storing protein is muscle mass. So if your body doesn't have, because you've got those 30,000 amino acids all strung together to create that titin, if your body needs it, it's there. If you don't get it from your diet, your body is going to strip down that titin to free float those 30,000 amino acids so that it can build the other types of proteins that it needs, because there's certain functions that are much higher prioritized by your body. Hemoglobin is a protein. Your body needs amino acids to build hemoglobin, and we need hemoglobin so that we can carry oxygen in our blood. If we don't carry oxygen in our blood, our body dies instantly. Well, not instantly, but you get the point. Me being a big proponent of most people not getting enough protein, that's why is the first place that your body is going to steal protein from it, if you're not getting it from your diet, is from muscle mass. So if your goal is to maintain muscle mass and you feel like you're having a hard time maintaining muscle mass, or if you're trying to increase muscle mass, try looking at your protein intake. I generally recommend people get about 40% of their calories from protein. And for most people, that's going to land them somewhere north of 100 grams a day. And remember, you can't do any more with a lot of protein in a single sitting. And this is true for almost anything, because your body's either going to use it or lose it, or in some cases, store it. With protein, it's use it or lose it. Your body doesn't really store the protein. So if your body doesn't need it then and there, it's going to get processed. Or it's going to enter gluconeogenesis and be used to create energy. And if it's leftover energy, remember that leftover energy is what we call body fat. I think that about does it. As always, feel free to hit me up on Facebook, or I don't know if we have comments left on here, but either way, reach out. We miss you guys. Can't wait to get back.